This is the Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
Welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. We're live right here, Wednesday, September 4th. In studio, he's been away all summer hanging out with the media elites that he usually does, and the Ivy Leaguers. It's the one and only Julian Zelizer. I'm calling today Julian Castro on yesterday. So you're Julian Zelizer from now on.
That's
and
fine
he's
with me.
Julian Castro.
Right.
So Julian Zelizer, CNN contributor, professor at Princeton University, author of various books, including the one with Kevin Cruz, Fault Lines, A History of the United States since 1974. Let's just talk for a second here, because you were interviewed in the New York Times about how presidents deal with national weather disasters.
Yep.
Now, before we get to that, let's factor into Donald Trump. Someone, I can't say it was Trump, used a Sharpie to change the weather map they showed the media today in the Oval Office, making it seem like the hurricane was going to hit Alabama, clearly because over the weekend, Trump had tweeted that Alabama was going to get hit hard. He was tweeting that and Alabama most likely be hit much harder than anticipated, like he knew something others didn't. And then the National Weather Service tweeted back, Alabama will not see any impacts. We repeat, no impacts from Hurricane Dorian, which probably he wanted to fire people over there. So first of all, let's just talk about your reaction to that before we get to the Sharpie craziness. What is your, as a historian, how do presidents typically respond to hurricanes?
Look, you have two different kinds of responses. That's what I told the Times. You have the effective response. So the classic example is Lyndon Johnson in 1965. Hurricane Betsy hits Louisiana, and he actually goes there. And in addition to a forceful response, he meets with people. He restores hope in the area. It's very effective. And then you have ineffective presidential leaders. The most famous is George W. Bush and Hurricane Katrina. Does everything wrong. Government's not prepared. And there's a category of failed responses. Then you have this third category we have now invented, using Sharpies to alter maps, tweeting about Deborah Messing as hurricanes are arriving, where the president is actually really part of the impending crisis as it unfolds. And that's definitely not what we've seen before.
This is Hurricane Dorian is horrible. Hurricane Trump worse. And so Hurricane Trump also tweeted about James Comey over the weekend.
Yeah.
And again, he somehow made a natural disaster about him because the Sharpie story is off the charts where, look, I don't know if he did it. They're showing it right now. You can see it's on MS. That somebody drew, there's no doubt someone used a Sharpie to extend the path of the hurricane into Alabama. And you don't have to be a CSI detective to understand that Trump had talked about Alabama over the weekend. And then if there was any doubt at all, he tweeted a short time ago saying, fake news, I told you it was going to Alabama. Here's the early maps. I'll accept your apologies. Literally, this is the craziness. So now you've got a sense, and Julian was joking, and he's got Sharpie on his hands and all over his face. He goes, it wasn't me. And he's got Sharpie everywhere. Sharpie's in his pocket, like an ink stain. So either Trump did it or someone in his administration to make him feel better did it. It's sort of like, it's almost like Bridgegate with, like, even if he didn't do it, Chris Christie's tone that he set made his staffers go out and block the bridge to make him feel good about himself. What do you make of this level of this? What if it turns out it's Trump? What if it turns out Trump did it?
It's as disturbing as it can be for a presidential historian. I mean, You can imagine one thing that's at work is he sees the TV, he sees the hurricane map, and that they have running all the time. And there's part of him that just can't take that because the attention is not on him, and he knows how to get the attention back on him. The other part is he's not interested in governing. This is just not part of the job in his mind. It's about saying things. It's about attention grabbing. And hurricane crisis requires really serious governing skills, both in terms of dealing with people in times of fear and mobilizing resources to help with catastrophic effects. Those are not things he cares about. He doesn't like to do them. So all of that leads you to have time or an advisor to have time to start, putting Sharpies on maps and showing them to prove that you said something you didn't say or vice versa. And I think it's all a reflection of a constant pattern we've seen.
You're an historian. I could only popped in my head like his library will just be filled with a wall of tweets, Sharpie Gate, like a bunch of Sharpie. This is my Sharpie that I use to change the map, and whatever other craziness. I don't even know. Oh, by the way, he does sign his resolutions and the bills with that big Sharpie thing, right? So I think if we put this together,
right.
I think we probably found, it's like Clue. It's like Trump in the study with a Sharpie. I'm pretty sure, and Colonel Mustard may have been there at the same time.
Right, but it's the scary part about it is you're looking at this incredible mismanagement of these moments, and people are terrified. I mean, people in Florida, people in Alabama, people are trying to figure out what's coming their way and how much damage there is going to be. We're seeing this as a recurring problem, massive storms all the time, constantly. And so you can't have a president do this. There needs to be some limits on what's acceptable and what's not, and he doesn't abide by those.
And by the way, Jonathan Karl, a reporter for ABC, and a couple others pointed out that whoever did that may have committed a crime. 18 U.S. Code Section 2074 states that whoever knowingly issues or publishes any counterfeit weather forecast or warning of weather conditions falsely representing such forecast or warning have been issued or published by the Weather Bureau or any government agency shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 90 days or both. So in the Al Capone theory of getting Trump, it's not the working with Russia. It's not the obstruction. It's the Sharpie.
Right.
And he violates a federal law and he gets high crime and misdemeanor. This is a misdemeanor. I mean, that's what this is here. But if it actually becomes, it's the House, they're going back in session September 9th. I think they got to look at this. I mean, there is a federal law here involved. It's not just because think about it. For people who it will impact businesses. It'll impact people about what they're going to do in their life. They see the president warning them. I saw on the map that it says Alabama, how it impacts it. It can impact the stock market. There's certain industries over there in Alabama. Let's be honest. There's reasons why you have a law like this because people can manipulate things.
Theoretically, you're right, but in practice, I think House Democrats have been pretty consistent so far
as sucking
in not reacting or not acting. So why, if you're President Trump, would you worry about this when you've done much grander things and there's been no repercussions? That's the whole point of trying to set precedents about what a president can or can't do.
That is so disheartening what you just said because it's so true. That's why it's so disheartening. I had Tom Steyer on earlier, and I said to Tom, what if the Democrats don't do impeachment, if you're Trump and you've gotten away with everything from self-promotion to your vice president staying at your hotel to your attorney general having a party at your hotel to moving the G7 to your event to accepting the help of Russia even though he didn't criminally conspire to at least arguably, and in my view, obstructing justice, why would you not just double and triple down? Nothing has happened to you. And this is his life. I mean, he's had this backstage pass to life, and it just keeps going on.
Yeah, and he's a president who doesn't have internal checks. So some presidents we would say they're not going to do that because they realize that's bad. That's not good for the country. That's not good for my
not
party.
Not going to do it.
Those
bad.
are
Right.
He doesn't think that way. And so that's exactly correct. And so you see stories like this Sharpie and the weather, and it's actually connected to this broader pattern of how has Congress responded, both Republicans and Democrats, to this president as there's mounting evidence of the way he misuses his power. And if there's no response, rationally, he should just keep doing it if it doesn't bother him.
Because it doesn't bother him. It
Right.
does, obviously. But you're just making his worst instincts feel like they're the correct instincts. And he'll be like, well, have the party. We're going to have G7 in my hotel. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
That's the insanity. I said something earlier, so I want to check with you as a historian. Richard Nixon used the apparatus of government to help himself politically violating, at least arguably violating laws. But did he ever try to self-profit or earn money in a way that Donald Trump is doing?
Not like this. I mean, there have been small cases. So the most famous was Lyndon Johnson, the family-owned television station. So there was in Texas. So there were accusations by conservatives that he was profiting and his relationship, also the big contracting company, Root and Brown, that becomes Halliburton. They were always very close. But neither Nixon, Johnson, no president was a business person of this magnitude, meaning he has a really vast business empire. And we're seeing again and again how there are no lines between the business empire and the presidency. That was a problem set up on day one, where basically they allowed this to happen. Congress didn't set up a firewall. They, let the Suns run it, which is almost the comedy routine. And what we're seeing now with these resorts is, unlike Nixon, unlike Johnson or any person accused of this, blatantly just making profit. Look, he's done this every weekend when he goes to a resort. He knows the TV stations and the media will be saying at the Mar-a-Lago, wherever he is, there's an ad right there. So he is reaping a lot of profit this way from the presidency. And it's back to Sharpie Gate, back to the Mueller report. No checks, no balance. That's how it works.
As an historian, is this bad? I mean, let me be as simplistic as possible here.
It's very bad. And I do think, partisanship is preventing Republicans from saying that out loud, other than a handful of them. But it's bad for either party. There are reasons we have these restraints that were put onto our political institutions. Government's a very good thing, but it can be abused. And that's what you're witnessing right now from the president.
So when the House Democrats go back in the session next week, and again, you don't give your opinion like a pundit, I understand that.
Yep.
But from objectively looking at the Democrats' place in history, our nation's place in history, like, is this a turning point or not? The historians will look back and go, wow, they should have done impeachment. Maybe they could have saved the nation, type of thing. Should Democrats do a formal impeachment inquiry?
Well, I wrote an op-ed a long time ago in the Washington Post after the Mueller report came out saying, yes, they had to.
Right.
And if the Democrats didn't do it, at some level, they will become complicit in allowing this, just as Republicans have been. So there's still a case to be made that's exactly the same case. I don't think they're going to do it. Even though the numbers are well beyond 50% of the Democratic caucus,
Yep.
Pelosi won't move unless it's all of the Democratic caucus. And it's not.
That's ridiculous.
It's not close to that right now. So yeah, at some level, historically, look, Pelosi doesn't care. She wants to protect the majority in 220. That's her objective. But 100 years from now, if this is now part of how presidents can act, Democrats were part of that moment.
I was doing research for an article today, and I wrote for the Daily Beast about guns, and that's something I stumbled upon. It was early 2009, and we're going to talk about politics of guns in a second, but one thing about Speaker Pelosi here. Early 2009, Obama's president, she's asked point blank about an assault ban. Will you push an assault weapons ban? At the time, Democrats had the House and the Senate, and her answer, nope. She said, no, we won't. And she said, we're going to try to enforce laws. And then later, it was reported that she said that she was concerned about losing rural Democrats, losing control of the House. 2010, you can't stop a wave. They got crushed, the Democrats. So why, if they had done the right thing, they would have been assault weapons banned, and they still maybe lost the House. Maybe they didn't. I'm not even sure, but you're going to lose it anyway. Now you can't pass laws. I get it. It's a little differently, but this defense, this idea of prioritizing politics over policy, to me is a loser. It's a loser, and it's a loser, and it should be a loser, frankly. It should be you give people policy, and if you lose on policy, I'm fine with that. But if you're going to lose because your political calculations are wrong, then goodbye. We're at the point where people call in and want her to be primaried.
Yeah. Well, I think, look, Pelosi's decision back then, to be fair, reflected where Democrats were.
No, I understand. There were rural Democrats who wouldn't support it. I get
So it's kind of part of the psychological makeup of Democrats often in this era. There's exceptions, but in general, that's where they are. And I think you're right. I think ultimately trying to predict what's going to move people, you have to do it if you're a leader. But it's not this fine-tuned science. And often, I think leaders make terrible decisions. They're not doing things that actually might enthuse supporters, and they're constantly trying to win elusive votes. And maybe she will be primaried. I don't know. She's a pretty formidable
she is being
figure.
primaried by someone. I've heard his name, but I don't think.
I don't think she'll lose.
I
think she's safe. But I think her position in this moment is raising bigger questions, not just about her, but what does a Democratic strategy actually look like in 220, 224? Who are the voters that are part of the Democratic coalition? And should everything rest on this very small pocket of voters in Wisconsin and Michigan? What exactly do swing voters want? I don't think this is clear. But I think sometimes Democrats are so paralyzed they don't really have the conversation. And that's not a good thing for a party.
So let's take a break and come back and talk about what's so different in 2020 about guns. Why they're talking about it. Let's take a break. Be right back. Look, it's time the media start calling out Trump's false statements for what they are. Lies. Trump is a liar. And by the looks of it, he's lying every day and twice on Sundays.
The Dean Obadala Show. And now, more of the Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM's Progress.
And welcome back to the Dean Obadala Show. We're live right here Wednesday, September 4th. Our friend Julian Zelizer, as I like to call him, Julian Zelizer. Now, he is now because of Julian Castro. So let's talk about the politics of guns. And to remind you that up until this election, Democrats have not been talking guns much. And if you go back to 1994, there was the assault weapons ban. Democratically controlled Congress passes this. The midterm comes up. Democrats lose control of the House for the first time in 40 years. Newt Gingrich is elected. In 2004, Bill Clinton writes an autobiography, and he talks about the reason for it, saying the NRA could rightly claim to have made Newt Gingrich the House Speaker. And then you go through the elections. 2004, John Kerry spent more time talking about he was a lifetime hunter and even said he owned an assault weapon, then talking about the assault weapon ban expiring. 2008, Barack Obama talked about wanting an assault weapons ban, did nothing once they got in on it. 2012, re-election, actually said things like, we need the Second Amendment. I support the Second Amendment. And that talked about, in fact, he did the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence, endorsed him and gave him an F rating by the next year. That's how little the Obama did. Near the end, we saw him try to change things. It was too late. And Hillary Clinton in 2016 gave a speech at the DNC saying, I'm not here to take your guns away. Literally opened with that kind of thing. Now, it's off the charts. Every 2020 candidate seems to have an ambitious plan, from not just universal background checks, banning assault weapons, banning high magazine capacities, Beto O'Rourke, mandatory buyback, Bernie Sanders, who in the past was criticized, supporting a voluntary buyback and an assault weapons ban, licensing, things you never would have ever heard. Liz Warren's got a plan for everything. She has a detailed plan on this about taxes on ammo and guns. It is remarkable what is going on. It is en masse. How do you explain the difference from 2016, where Hillary did not make this a focal point, to 2020? This is nonstop. We're talking about it.
Well, in terms of presidents, I read this great study that looked at what did presidents say after mass shootings. And no one, including Obama in his first term, said almost anything. I mean, maybe thoughts and prayers kinds of speeches. And they say the turning point was Obama in 2014 and 2015 after Newtown.
Yeah, Newtown.
And that was when the first time he made this very forceful speech saying something has to been done in terms of legislation. This can't continue. And then he spoke about it a lot. He spoke about the NRA. He said Congress was dysfunctional. And it became part of what you heard from a president. So I think that was important, even though Clinton didn't really do anything in 2016. Part of it is just the severity. I mean, people are seeing a nightmare unfold every weekend or every few weekends, it seems like, on their television sets and computer screens. And I think that has affected public opinion. There's just an insanity about the existing laws, and people are not totally irrational. And then grassroots has worked. I think it's changed, even though it's slow. I think the Parkland students, a lot of these other groups that are out there pushing for pressure are starting to counteract the NRA. And there was this New York Times had an article how the NRA is starting to lose influence in Congress.
Well, they're also in disarray.
Yeah, they're internally in disarray. They have all kinds of dysfunctional parts of their own leadership. So it might be in the next few years nothing happens. But it doesn't mean that something isn't happening in terms of the politics. And Democrats on this are on the right side of the issue.
In talking about the mass shootings, and I was telling Julian during the break here, a mass shooting in one organization defines it here as any single incident in which 4 or more people are shot. Not killed, but 4 or more shot in a single incident. In 2018, we had 340 mass shootings with that definition, almost every day. Right now, folks, as of September 1st, we are on pace to eclipse a daily, actually having more than one mass shooting a day on average. It's actually ticked up right now this year from last year. And we are seeing, because they're huge headline events, El Paso, Dayton, the guy this weekend, I was in Texas, hours away. We weren't close to the shooting, but in the same state we were. At the end of last year, we had the Tree of Life Synagogue terrorist attack, but that was a shooting again, 11 Jewish Americans killed. You had Parkland earlier in the year. You have so much, and then it becomes like a drumbeat of like, oh my God, another mass shooting, where people, and public opinion is shifting. There was a Fox News poll came out in August. In 2017, they asked how much support for an assault weapons ban. Only 54%. Now, the latest poll 2 weeks ago, 67% of Americans per Fox News poll support an assault weapons ban. Over 90% support universal background checks, except for Dan Crenshaw, who today the congressman was saying he's opposed to it, just is ridiculous. But you have 82% supporting licensing for guns. 82%. And, I have gun lovers call in. They want to fight over licensing. This is a common sense thing to have someone have a license. Just no Democrat would talk about it. Now, Cory Booker has. You've got Bernie for it, Liz Warren for it. Licensing. This is a game changer because there's going to be conditions with a license.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this campaign is definitely a sea change because it's not a second-term president. This is a group of Democrats who don't have office. They don't even have the nomination, and they're putting themselves out there on record for these kinds of measures. So I think it reflects what you're talking about. It still has to work against House of Representatives and gerrymandering, keeping these Republicans in line, and the money from the NRA and the membership still being effective. So there's a clash between broad public opinion and the way the House works, as we see on climate change, a lot of these issues right now. The other kind of worrisome, scary part of this is that it's the kind of problem that keeps getting worse in terms of all these guns are out there now.
Yeah, I know.
So it's not simply about preventing future guns. We now have a gun problem. They're floating around American society at a kind of rampant rate.
Can you think of and I'm just springing this on you,
Yep.
any mainstream presidential candidate calling for a mandatory buyback of weapons. And Beto O'Rourke yesterday said, I just make it very clear. I'm saying these guns will be gone. Like, you cannot own one.
I can't think of anything
can't
like
think
that
of
unless
either.
it was some marginal.
No, but I'm talking about a
thing.
mainstream
no,
candidate.
No. This was one of the third rails of American politics. It was like, it's a little like Social Security for Republicans. We're going to stay away from that. Most Democrats, liberal, moderate, this was not something they wanted to do. But now that's definitely changing.
I think you're so right to talking about the grassroots efforts, like Moms Demand Action. I've had Shannon Watts on numerous times. I had her on my old Inside show when no one knew that organization. I just thought it was really a great organization, and it's built up to be very effective. And when she comes on, talks about on the state level their successes, and their success rate's around 90%. She quantified it in either opposing laws to make it easier to get guns or advocating for laws that will restrict it from people who shouldn't have it. And then you had combined that with the NRA having their problems. I mean, to remind people, in the 2016 cycle, they spent $70 million on behalf of Republicans, $30 million of that alone for Trump. It doesn't seem like they're going to have anything close to that amount of money to throw out there for Republicans or for Trump.
Yeah, look, the NRA has money and they have membership. And people in Washington will often say the membership really matters with them. Even though we don't think of it, they had a huge base of support. Those people will vote, and they'll vote you out if you propose any kind of regulation. And so the groups you're talking about are basically starting to build an alternative, and that creates pressure. Politics that way really is local. Both, Republicans used that kind of grassroots energy to fight against Obama's health care. And I think right now you're seeing this with gun efforts. And so I think the NRA is really vulnerable. I mean, I think they're still strong, but if you're looking long perspective, you can see how this is changing.
It clearly is. And it's remarkable and you touched on it, that it was the third rail of politics, and it really was. They did not want to talk about it. I mean, everyone remembers President Obama the last couple of years talking about it. It wasn't until I did research today that I realized how much he didn't want to talk about it in the past, in 2008 and 2012, and did not push for even closing universal background, that gun show loophole. They did not talk about it in 2009 and 10. And I found an article of Mike Quigley, the Democrat congressman, complaining and he's a Democrat, complaining the White House is not pushing for even closing background checks loopholes. Now we're going, what do you like to see people dead? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
So this sea change in a 10 years is remarkable. But so much of it is the body count. I mean, to be blunt, it's
the body count.
Count.
The other part, which has a downside, meaning our modern media, whether it's the internet or whether it's cable, covers things all the time when things happen. So there's definitely bad sides of that, and it undercuts coverage of issues and it moves attention from one thing to another. But with these shootings, people are really seeing what we're talking about. They're seeing the victims. They're seeing what the shooting looked like. And I have a sense that's impacting it too. These are not just something you read about anymore. It's almost as if you were on the ground watching after they happen. And that's powerful stuff against what the NRA is arguing, which is this abstract kind of cooked idea about what the Constitution says.
If they were, and I don't think they would, but if they were to show the image of what an AR-15 or assault weapon does to the human body, especially to a child, I think it would impact public opinion in ways that we can't even anticipate. It would traumatize some. I think that's part of the problem. Sure. You'd have to warn people, but I think if you see those images of how it rips through a human body and comes in like a bullet, like a pin, and goes out like a grapefruit, and you really saw that, it would be stunning.
Well, look, we're in a moment. It's being reversed now, but for a while that was one of the effective ways that public health officials combated smoking. It was starting to show what cigarettes did to you, and it was starting to show, what your lungs really look like. That's effective. It's real. It's not made up. It's just the real effects. And I think with guns, it's not that different. Sure, you can show an image of a gun in Walmart. That's one way to do it. The other is to show a gun in action and what's happening in these schools and what's happening in these cities. And that's what you have to do if you're running a campaign against something this vile.
So let's take a break and come back and talk about the 2020 race and what's going on now in terms of sort of the horse race part of it. Joe Biden, you wrote an article on Joe Biden and some gaffes. We'll talk about that. And also talk about Trump having these primary challenges, and at what point does history tell us it can actually have an impact on him? So let's take a quick break. Come right back with more of the Dean Obeidallah Show.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
Whoever's the next president, we should call him the 45th president of the United States. And this will go down as a dark time in America that we'll never refer to again.
SiriusXM Progress. And now, more of the Dean Obeidallah Show on SiriusXM's Progress.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live here Wednesday, September 4th. In studio, our friend Julian Zelizer from CNN, professor at Princeton University and author of numerous books. So let's talk 2020, my friend. Let's start with some good news before we get to Biden, because it could be troubling news. We'll see. Depends how it comes out with you. We'll talk about it because you wrote an article. Donald Trump now trails Democrats by a historically large margin, including CNN, is it Harry Enton? Is that his name? Wrote an article going back to World War II that looking at majority of the incumbents he looked at all the incumbents and how they were trailing or leading their primary challenger, their number one challenger. And out of the last 11, 9 were ahead. The only one were not with Jimmy Carter and Barack Obama by 1 point. So he ends up winning. But the point being that neither one was where Trump is down by an average 10 points to Joe Biden. How much does this matter? Where does this matter?
Look, every measure we have now suggests Trump is in serious trouble, that he's in Jimmy Carter territory, and he can easily become a one-term president. The polls show like half the Democrats almost can beat him. They're beating him in the key states. They're beating him nationally, and he's not getting credit for the economy, the good parts of the economy. People don't like him. and his support has not expanded. So rationally, I look at that like Harry does, or like a lot of Greg Sargent at the Post, and say, this is for the Democrats to take. But there's always a little part of you that wonders, are the polls really registering everyone? Is this a different kind of presidential polling where some people are not saying that they're going to come out and vote for him? Are people not telling the truth? Because it's actually embarrassing to say you support him in some circles. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not a pollster, so I don't know how much those fears should count. But I think that's what people are wondering about. And obviously, we're still far from the election.
Yeah,
and
that's fair.
No one can even imagine what this election is going to look like. And this gets back to something we were talking about earlier. He is going to unleash fire and fury on the Democratic nominee, and no one's thinking of that in some ways. I mean, everyone's imagining a somewhat normal campaign. You're going to have the Justice Department investigating people, and you're going to have a kind of blitz of verbal assault and social media campaign. So all of that, I don't know how you calculate that and where the polling is today. He hasn't even gotten started.
That's a good point, because you're right. There's the negatives for a lot of these Democratic candidates are much lower than they will be in a year from now and in a year and a few months from now, to be honest. I mean, we're like 400 plus days to the election. I think the one thing I saw is that, I think it was the Washington Post, they said Trump could lose by as many as 5 million popular votes, but they still did a path for him to win the Electoral College. Nate Cohn did. So 5 million. But the good thing is the midterm, Democrats won on a national level by 10 million votes over the Republicans. So things are not in a vacuum. Those polling was pretty correct there on the midterm election.
True.
Which gives me, anything can change, but it gives me solace that the polls are correct. It also shows if we come out, that 10 million margin was a record for a midterm. So that's something to be said there.
Although Republicans retook control of the House in 1994 for the first time since 1954.
Right, in 40
Clinton
years.
was reelected in 96. 2010 midterms were great for Republicans. Obama was reelected. So it doesn't always necessarily translate. And
why did you ruin this? Why did you ruin this history?
There's lots of examples of that.
No. But we got to fight tooth and nail through everything, until the Democrat is sworn in on January 20th at noon, at 12:01 p.m. or noon. That brings me to a question you said, though, about what Trump would do. I'm not wishing for the economy to fail. I say that all the time because I say that sincerely, and I've criticized Bill Maher a year ago for calling for it, and I think you did too. The idea, we have the first polls that have come out in the last couple of weeks. More Americans say the economy is getting worse than getting better. 37% say getting worse over getting better. It's the first time we've seen this, and you see Trump's numbers sliding even among Republicans a little teeny bit. It seems to be a crack there in the armor. If the economy were to continue to stumble, and a year from now, we're not going to be at a high unemployment rate, but we're at 5%, let's say, and it's ticking up. If Trump doesn't have the economy to run on, I shudder to think what he's going to run on. Because we already see the bigotry and white supremacy and everything now. If you've got no economy at all, where does this go?
Well, he will say the economy is doing well regardless, and the bad news will be pinned to Democrats. So we know that whatever happens, that's going to be the mantra.
Right.
There's a lot of his supporters who don't. What we're learning is what people thought. It is the cultural issues. That's what they're voting on. That's what they like him for. And so it might be that the swings in the economy don't shape his overall support. That said, obviously, if it's sliding down and more Americans feel it, it does hurt him because a lot of people aren't his most ardent supporters. A lot of wealthier Republicans don't like when the stock market goes up and down. And he can't afford to lose them either. They're part of his base. So there are ways it does clearly make him politically vulnerable. On the other hand, we have to kind of say it might not play out as easily as we think, that the economy goes south and so does his presidency.
Oh, boy.
And you have this kind of media world and conservative world of manipulated information, and that's the playing field he's going to count on.
The one thing, and tell me if this is fair, I think this is a truism. It's the Dean truism. I'm going to self-name it like Trump would do. That no politician can tell you the economy is better than you feel, nor tell you it's worse than you feel. So if you're struggling and Trump's like, the economy is great, doesn't matter. The same way President Obama was hesitant to talk about the economy being great, even though it was climbing, because he knew so many Americans were struggling. Trump doesn't care about that part. But if he's going around the country saying his only thing could be reelect me and I will turn things around. I don't know if he'll do it. The guy who just doubled down on Sharpies on the hurricane map. I'm not kidding. So what do you make of?
Well, this is where Democrats do need more than simply saying, I'm different than Trump as a theme. And if that moment comes, that's the way things unfold. You will need candidates whoever the candidate is, who offers a really powerful response on where they're going to take the country, what they're going to do for the economy, the kinds of Warren-like proposals that are out there. Might not be exactly what they're promising, but they have a vision. That's where I think Biden's vulnerable. If he's not offering that kind of stuff, if it's simply, I'll get things back to normal, that could be a weakness. It could allow Trump to keep on moving, even if things are doing poorly. So if it's Biden or someone else, they're going to need a policy response.
Yeah, I think you sum it up so well. If Biden's message is basically, let's go back to the old days. I mean, it's almost like Trump likes make America great again, but
right.
less
with a blue hat,
less bold and less brash. And I don't know how that really sells in the long run, except I can tell you the animus towards Donald Trump among so many of us. I mean, there was a poll, maybe it was Quinnipiac a week or two ago. I love looking at not just the top line, but strongly disapprove versus strongly approve to try to get a sense of an enthusiasm gap. Of strong, it was like disapprove was like 55, 56%, but of strongly disapprove was like 48% of that 56%. Like people who don't like Trump, almost all of them really, really don't like him. And those who strongly approve, there was like a 27-point gap between strongly approve versus strongly disapprove. And that's accurate. That's a massive enthusiasm gap right there.
They have the polls on their side right now. The Democrats should be happy. You could say if the Democrats lose, they should be sued for malpractice because it's theirs for the taking. But there's all these other structural issues that are also at play, whether it's the power of the presidency being used in an election in a way we haven't seen, which is much grander than anything he could do in 2016, or voting restrictions that are fully in place right now in many states, to this really wild west of media and social media, which will be important in influencing decisions. That's all part of the mix too, not just the polls. And so
anything you can, I know you're predicting the future here like a weatherman. That's not fair, but based on history, anything outrageous that modern day presidents have done to help themselves get reelected that Trump would amplify and escalate to take to new levels?
No, I mean, look, they've tried to influence the economy. Nixon famously did that to try to pump up the economy before the election. It worked. He got reelected. So presidents do public spending programs right around election. They make big, bold promises. But that's not the kind of stuff he's going to do.
No.
He's going in a much dirtier direction. A lot of presidents have done dirty politics. Let's not be mistaken. Nixon, back to him. But this will be a whole other beast, I think, in terms of what he's willing to do. That gets back to the Mueller report. That gets back to the fact that Democrats have not checked him. So going into the election season, he is willing to throw all restraints off and do what's necessary to win. And so Democrats have to imagine that as they're preparing for a campaign.
So it might be not just Russia, are you listening, but Russia, North Korea. If you're listening, I could use a hand here in Italy and Brazil.
Well, even more ominously, the Justice Department, I need a hand. So that's a really kind of real threat.
Indict his opponent? I mean, just
throw out investigations and, imagine there are already hints with Biden and his son.
Yeah.
And if you don't think the president is going to try to devastate Biden as a father, not only in trying to make his family look corrupt, but hurt him through his son, then you're missing what's happened with this president, and that's coming.
It's interesting you bring up the DOJ because it's using the apparatus of government. Nixon did it, but this time it's more legal. It's just ethically questionable by Bill Barr, who clearly does not have any problem with ethics, as we've seen. I wonder, though, the fact that Joe Biden is so known and almost a household name in almost everyone's house, can you redefine him now in the eyes of the moderates in the middle or independents in the middle who are like, well, I've seen Joe Biden forever. I never saw that side to him. Like, this doesn't seem real.
I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical that he's insulated from this. And let's also add Fox Television will be there. Maybe Chris Wallace will be not doing this, but everyone else on that network is going to be pumping out these stories day in, day out. So I think Biden can have his reputation chipped away despite how long he's been in office. Well, and you even saw it with Hillary Clinton to some extent. She had a bad reputation and a bad but what they did in that campaign, I mean, they turned her into a criminal.
Right.
Literally turned her into a criminal. And she was as known a commodity in politics as you could get.
Good point. Yeah, the lock her up was a chant of someone that was a criminal. All right, let's take a break, come back and chat a little bit more about Joe Biden, article you wrote on Biden, on his gaffes, and what that means to you as an historian. Be right back with more of the Dean Obeidallah Show on Julian Zelizer.
Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live here Wednesday, September 4th. Here with Julian Zelizer, is getting emails from the editors at CNN going, can you write an article? You haven't written anything in an hour. Where are you? And you wrote an article for CNN about Biden and about the gaffe machine, and concerns about, and you start off with a speech that he's given recently about something happening in a war, and factually was incorrect, but the essence is the way he's defending it. So tell us a little bit about your point here.
Yeah, I mean, the gaffe itself, it was bad, but it's not debilitating, but it reflects all these concerns Democrats have right now. One concern is he actually as electable once the campaign starts, or will he make mistakes like this? B, does he have a core set of beliefs, or is he one of these people who just says whatever it seems like he should say to please the room? And that's an example like that. And finally, his age, which is a serious issue for many people, and they wonder, can he have the stamina for the campaign, and is he really up for this? I ended by saying, but what keeps him insulated is what you're talking about, Trump.
Point of view. At what point do these polls actually matter more? I mean, we're in September now. We are in the fall. The Iowa caucus is in February this time, not in January. So we get an extra month there of campaigning. And then it goes very quick after that. Then you got New Hampshire, South Carolina, Super Tuesdays a month later. Boom.
Up and up, drawing huge crowds. If she wins in Iowa and then she wins in New Hampshire, she's going to be incredibly viable to think that she can win. I mean, she has really strong organization enthusiasm.
So right now, it seems there's a top tier, pretty clear, of three people. It's Bernie, Biden, and Liz Warren. And it seems on some level in most recent polling, and I'm not wishing for this, but it seems to be happening, the other people are drifting further and further back. Yeah. You know, Harris and Buttigieg are the closest. They're around 5 to 7 if they're lucky on a poll. And then the bottom is falling out, and some of the other one who was at 2 and 3, like Beto O'Rourke's been in the media lately. He's dropping down to 1 in most of the polls. And Booker.
Hard to imagine when you have 3 pretty formidable candidates who are doing well, who have strong organization, that these others are somehow going to pop out. And
do you need Biden to implode to bring up like a Harris? I think
that's what Buttigieg or Harris are really waiting for. It's not the other two. It's if Biden all of a sudden falls out, then you're going to see a scramble in the party. There will be Democrats who say, certainly Sanders is too far to the left to win. Warren, I'm not sure about. And that's when you start looking for other people. So I think they're staying in to see what happens with Biden. You know, he's not falling out so far. He's pretty much still in the lead and doing well. But I think that's what they're waiting for.
It's interesting. I mean, with all these candidates we had, you know, can you see it go to a...
That could easily happen. And people always say this when it's competitive primaries. I said it with the Republicans last time around. Usually doesn't happen.
Right.
But you can imagine it because, again, you have 3 just on top who I don't think they're going to move that much. And the Winton, but about what needs to be done to fix this country.
My friend, thank you very much for coming in for the hour. It's been a while now. You've been traveling and doing things in the summer. White House correspondent for Wall Street Journal. We had Julian. Be back tomorrow, all new live show. I'm on Twitter at Dean Obeidallah. Or drop me an email. Love to hear from you. Sincerely, Dean at deanofradio.com. That's DEAN at deanofradio.com. Look forward to chatting with you right here tomorrow on the Dean Obeidallah Show.